This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
And she has a picture of him in her photos on Facebook. And I went and looked and I was like, oh, that's my face. So it was really exciting. Because I've never looked like anybody but my own kids. But seriously, I told my therapist I can't say mean things about my face because it's my dad's face. So now when I look at my face, I'm like, I know who that face belongs to, so I need to be nicer.
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that delves into the world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. In July 2021, my life took a surprising turn when I found out that I'm an NPE, a person who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. Join me as we explore the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. Get ready to unravel the astonishing journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. Sometimes, after DNA surprises are revealed, our relationships with our raised parents become strained. Sometimes, this leads to estrangement. But for others, these surprises simply compound already strained relationships. When Dawn had her DNA surprise, she was already virtually no contact with her mother. In this week's episode, she shares why she initially made the decision to go little to no contact with her raised family, largely due to her mistreatment compared to her other siblings. She reveals why she took her DNA test to begin with, and how she finally learned the truth about her parentage. While Dawn's relationships with her raised family remain distant, she's built incredible relationships with her newfound step-siblings, who insist that had her biological father known about her, he would have loved and accepted her. Thank you for sharing your story, Dawn.
My name is Dawn. I'm 57, and I'm from Michigan. I'm the oldest of 5. I never thought that it would be me. I thought there might be one in our family, but I did not think it would be me. I'm the oldest. I mean, I'm the reason they got married. They were 18 and almost 20 when they got married. Why else would they get married at that early age? My mother was 17 when she got pregnant. She was 6 months along when they got married, and they went on to have 4 more. So there's 14 years between myself and the youngest. So that's a lot of kids.
Yeah, that's a lot of kids.
It is a lot of kids. I say that having lived through it, and I'm just like, whew, it's a lot of kids every time. The story that I was told growing up is that I was the result of a broken condom in a backseat incident, which, I think in the 60s was pretty common. And her dad didn't want her to get married. He wanted her to have the baby and adopt it out and then marry a farmer that was friends with him. And she didn't want to do that. And so she ran off and got married. They were very young, and I try to look at them with some grace. I've been working on that. That's what my goal is for this year, is to look at them with some forgiveness and grace. They were very young. They didn't know a lot. They didn't know anything about parenting, really. They were really poor at that. They were big partiers. A lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs, a little swinging thrown in there. It was interesting growing up with parents like that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that have those same stories. So the first few years, it wasn't, I don't really remember anything terrible until I was about 9. My brother was born 2 years after me. And then I had a sister that was born 5 years after my brother. She's 7 years younger than me. And about the time I turned 9, that was right around her 1-year birthday. That same year. And the year I turned 9, there was no birthday. We didn't have my birthday at all that year. And my birthday is the day after Christmas. I know that's a struggle for a lot of people. But for me, I was a kid and I was like really excited.
Yeah, you're
my
9 years
birthday's tomorrow.
old. Yeah.
I know it's Christmas today, but my birthday's tomorrow. And my parents said, yeah, we're going out tomorrow, but we're going to pick up your present and your cake and bring it back. And they didn't. And between Christmas and New Year's, they went out every night and partied. And each night I was waiting up, and each night they didn't bring anything until New Year's, when they brought home a Kmart bag and they said, here you go. Here's your present. There's no cake. We're sorry. And I said, okay, that's fine, because I'm just excited about a present. It was a bag of socks with clearance stickers on them, and they were all toddler size. So, of course, they wouldn't fit me because I was 9. And so my mom said, well, if you don't want them, I'll give them to your sister. And I said, okay, that's fine. So we just skipped my birthday that year. And it was really kind of interesting. And the whole year was kind of like that. I had several incidences, injuries, where they were like, yeah, you're fine. We're not going to take you in. And then it turned out to be a bigger deal than it was. And I realize now, looking back, that it's probably because they had a son and a daughter and me. Only I didn't know it was and me. I thought I was part of the group.
So were your other siblings treated differently from you? And did you realize that as a child?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It was right in that time frame of like 9 to 12 that I spent almost every weekend with my grandmother, my birth certificate father's mother. She's my favorite person in the entire world. And I found out that while I was spending weekends with her, the 4 of them were going and doing things. And so, of course, I said, well, I don't want to go to grandma's. I want to go with you guys. And they said, well, you can't, because if we have to take 3 kids, it's too expensive. That was kind of, I guess, my punishment was to go to my grandma's. They didn't know anything because it was the best experience ever. But still, I wanted to be included in the family stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it was really kind of odd. Like, I had grade expectations. I wasn't allowed to get anything less than a B. If I got a B minus, there was going to be at least a lecture, if not a punishment. If I got less than that, definitely there were groundings, maybe spankings, who knows. My siblings never had that, which was very interesting to me. As I got older, I realized that no matter how big the offense, there was not going to be a punishment to correlate with that. When I was in middle school, we did blood typing in science class. I feel like this is how a lot of people realize that something's not quite right. We did blood typing in science class. I was super excited because I'm kind of a science nerd. And I came home and I was like, what are your blood types? And my parents told me. And I said, that's not right. And they said, what do you mean that's not right? So I explained what we did in school. And they said, well, your teacher doesn't know what they're talking about. Which, again, I feel like is what parents say when they're wrong.
What was your reaction to this? You've learned now. You've got some science in your mind. And your parents are like, no.
Yeah, and I thought, well, I think he's smarter than you. I think he knows. I got in a lot of trouble for that. There was a big punishment. It was not okay. And so I didn't question it again because I knew that it was going to be worse if I did.
Did you then just choose to believe your parents? Or at this point, were you really questioning what they said?
I kind of just tucked it back and just went, forget it, because it's just, I'm not going to worry about it.
Sure.
But when I got to high school, we did Punnett squares. That's always fun, right? Where you figure out all your traits. And I did it. And by then I had more siblings. So, I had more people to look at. And I could find the things that were from my dad on everybody, but not on me. And I had weird stuff that nobody else had, not even my mom. And so that was another thing that I said, I think there's a problem here, but I didn't mention it to them. I just tucked it away and went on my merry way. But when I got to college, I had a boyfriend that came home with me for Easter weekend. And he said on the way back, were you adopted by any chance? Because I don't feel like you are from this family. And I said, I'm the oldest. That sounds crazy. And he said, okay, I'm just asking because you don't look like anybody in that family. And he said, I know it sounds crazy if you're the oldest, but I'm just saying. And And that really kind of just stuck with me, that other people could see it as clearly as I could. He wasn't the first of my friends to say it.
Was it mostly based on looks, or was there personality elements too? What made everyone see so many differences?
Everything. I'm only 5 foot tall. My parents are 5'6" and 5'10". All my siblings are taller than me. The girls aren't too much taller, a few inches, but still. My grandma used to say I was the only grandchild she had ever had, and she had like 40, that could walk under the dining room table when they learned how to walk. And I was like, yeah. I was very tiny. By the time I was in high school, my sisters couldn't wear my clothes, and they were in elementary and middle school because they were bigger than I was.
Wow. Yeah.
I read all the time. I was very interested in science, very interested in history. And I'm a little bit stubborn. There were just like all these little things that my parents would be like, why are you like this? And I kept thinking, I think it's genetics. I don't think I'm just being weird for no reason or because I want to. I don't want to be weird. So I mostly tried to just play along and just try and make life as smooth as possible. But I always had that in the back of my head that I don't think he's my dad. I don't think he is. Everything just kept going together. And I was like, yeah, I don't think this is it. But I was like, maybe I got all the weird genes at once. And that's just the way it is. But they did continue to treat me differently. Back up just a little bit and say that my mother is bipolar and she refuses to medicate. So she's not really a joy to live with. And my dad is she's right no matter what. So when she did things that were off kilter, you were supposed to say, 100% and move on. Only they were usually things like telling him that I ran off and went someplace that I never did. Like I was home doing homework and she'd say, well, she took off and went over here with some boy. And then he would be angry and he would ground me for a month. And I'd be like, but I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. I was sitting here the whole time. But it also was things like I had a steady boyfriend when I was 17. And so I thought, well, eventually teenagers do things that they're not supposed to do. And I thought I better get on birth control because who knows? But I want to be protected because I've taken care of enough kids. I don't want any. So I got on birth control.
Yeah.
And one day I kept it in a little safe box with a key. And one day I opened it up and it was gone. My dad, I talked to him and he said, we shouldn't be on it in the first place. And then he said, well, I'm sure your mother took it. But that was okay. I shouldn't ask her about it. And I was like, I don't know if she expected that I would just go ahead and do whatever and get pregnant anyway, because that was not my jam. I was not doing it. So I was like, well, I guess I just start over. But it was all kinds of weird things like that. And things like they had a friend that set all my alarms off. He was a grown man. He was their age. But he just, now I would say, don't leave him around your daughters. Mm-hmm. Not at all. And it turned out to be correct. He did go to prison for messing around with a teenage girl. So, but he would come over and he would say things to me and I didn't like it. So I tended to stay away. And one time she called me into the living room and he grabbed me and was like forcibly holding me in place and trying to kiss me and trying to grope me. And I'm yelling and my mom's like, stop screaming. Just let him kiss you and it won't be bad and you'll just be done. And I thought, man, if I let him touch me, that is going to be the start of a whole big thing because I can't let him do anything.
Oh my God.
I know that much right now. So I fought with him while she just laughed about it.
Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. It just sounds like they had no parental instinct to protect you or didn't choose to. That's awful.
Yeah, I don't feel like she looked at me as their child. Even though his name was on my birth certificate, I was their only child for 2 years. I think that once they had children together, it was like, oh, we have our children and this one. And we're not sure what to do with this one. So I used to say, I live like Cinderella, and my friends would be like, oh, that's so funny. And I was like, no, for real. I mean, I
Yeah.
take care of the children. I do the laundry, I clean the house. When I was 16, I got a part-time job, and my parents made me pay $100 a month rent. When I was 16, that's a long time ago, but I made like just over $3 an hour. $100 a month was a lot. And I was still in high school. When my son graduated from college, he said, do you want me to pay rent while I'm living with you? And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's a ridiculous thing. And he said, well, I'm living here and I'm not paying for anything. I said, but you're saving your money so that you can go out and be on your own. I said, I'm not my mother. I'm not going to do that. I tend to take everything they did and just
To the
flip it around and
opposite.
do the
Yeah. Be the
opposite.
parent you needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was all a really interesting situation. When I went to college, they moved and didn't tell me. I was getting ready to come home. I think it was on Christmas break. And the day before I was supposed to leave, I got a letter in the mail. I mean, thank goodness I got it then, because otherwise I wouldn't have gotten it at all and gone to the wrong house. And the letter said, oh, we moved. I hope you can still make it. Here's the address. And I was like, that's not anywhere near where we lived. It was like an hour away. So I had to cancel the ride because, you do ride share home. And I was struggling to find somebody. One of my friends was very kind and said, it's out of my way, but I'll take you. I'll take you there. I don't know how you're going to get back, but I can take you home. So he did drive me home, which was very kind of him. But I'm always like, when people talk about trauma from growing up, and I'm like, I had a lot of different things growing up, but I think my parents moving while I was in college and not telling me was the tip top. That was
I mean, it's just, you're really painting a picture of neglect, from your parents.
Yeah, it wasn't like they didn't do a lot of things. They just didn't do a lot of things.
Right.
And
right.
So it was kind of crazy. I did take good care of my siblings. So whether or not they grew up to be decent people is another question, but I did try my hardest.
What was your relationship like with your family then after college until you took your DNA test? What was that like?
It wasn't the best. Here's one of the traits that I have that I feel like they're missing is that they were my family. So I was trying very hard because I kept thinking there had to be something wrong with me because I just wasn't trying hard enough because they were all the same. And then there was me. So I was like, maybe I have to try a little harder. Maybe I have to do a little more. So holiday gatherings, I organized them. My mom would want to have them at her house, and that was fine. But I did all the calling everybody. I did all the food organization, what we were doing. And nobody offered to help. They just, like, I was self-appointed, and they were like, good for you. And so we just carried on. But the year I had my daughter, I was just turned 28 and it was at Christmas. So I just was having my birthday and Christmas. And my mom did not buy me gifts until right before I got there, like a day or two before. And she bought me sweatsuits from a thrift store. They weren't new sweatsuits. They had like embroidery and stuff on them. They were like I was 28 and there was something that I was like, oh, my grandma would wear this. And she would be like, look how cute this is.
Yeah.
And I would be like, that is cute on you, grandma. But I was 28 and it was not so cute on me. And in the same year, my siblings were getting all kinds of really nice gifts. And it was the divide is very visible. It started coming to a point when I wasn't married. I was living with my boyfriend when I had my first child. And I needed to come home. And I called and I said, can I come home at least for 6 months to get on my feet and get myself together? And they said, okay, fine. And I came home and I didn't want to be there and they didn't want me there. But I was like, we're going to make the best of this. I got a job. My aunt helped me buy a car. I found a daycare. I was like, I'm on it. After I was there a few weeks, I came home one day from work and daycare, and my mom handed me a piece of paper and she said, here, you can go stay here. And I said, what are you talking about? What is this? And she said, it's a shelter. I called and you and the baby can go and stay there because you can't stay here anymore. And I was like, I'm not taking this baby to a shelter. What is wrong with you? And I waited until my dad got home. And I handed him the piece of paper. And I said, Mom said I have to go stay at the shelter. First time ever, he stood up for me and said, and it was only because I had a baby. If it was just me, I think I would have been out. But I had a baby, and he said, absolutely not. You're staying here. So I cut my time as short as possible. And at 5 months, I moved out. And I then started lowering my contact. And then I got married, and my dad got really mad. And after the wedding, he said, you're so rude. You didn't even thank me for paying for your dress and your flowers. And I said, Dad, you didn't pay for my dress or my flowers. I paid for them. And he said, no, I gave your mother the money. And I said, well, I don't know what she spent it on, but I have the receipt for the dress and the flowers, and I paid for them. He never said anything to her that I know of, but I needed to let him know that that is not what happened.
Right.
Because I kept waiting, and the dress place kept calling. And I'd say, man, my mom said she's going to pay. And then I would call her, and she'd say, oh, I'll take care of it. And it kept happening. And finally I said, you know what? I've got to pay for this dress or I'm going to lose it. So I just took care of it. And I was like, I'm done. So it wasn't until I think maybe 2010 that I cut them off. And I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I have kids, and I have a husband, and I have a house, and you are all so much drama. And I just can't do it anymore. And I felt like the worst person in the entire world because I was being so selfish, being like, I can't do this. And I thought, if I were a better person, I could make a go of this. I know I could. And I was just beating myself up about it all the time. I felt terribly guilty. But really, in reality, I only cut off my mother. I didn't cut off my dad. That was the end of him. He never contacted me. He never did anything. It was just like, he was like, great, I'm out. My siblings, basically the same thing. I had one sibling that kept in touch, and we got pretty close for a while. And then she has a lot of similar mental health issues as our mother. And she kind of went the same route. And I had to say, we can work through this. You just need to take your meds. You just need to take care of yourself. And she was like, you know what? I'm out. And then she was gone. Every once in a while, I would get a birthday card. And I would always be like, what is this? And I would open it, and it'd be a birthday card. And I'd be like, whatever. I would text my friends, be like, I got a birthday card this year. And they'd say, your mom is so crazy. And I'd say, I know. No contact, but like every third year or so, I get a birthday card. I don't understand how her mind works. So we just kind of went on with no contact with them at all.
It's really mind-boggling, like, especially because you are your mother's biological child. I mean, come to find out. So, I mean, not that it would excuse anything, even if she wasn't, but this idea, like you're saying, that your siblings are their children, and looking back, that's why there was this difference. It's like we're trying to rationalize something that makes no sense.
Absolutely. And my daughter has a different biological dad. My husband adopted my daughter when she was 7. We had to wait until we'd been married and for a specific length of time in our state. I don't know if it's like that everywhere. And so, she switched her last name, and that's her dad. That's who she's known since she was 2.5. But she has always known that she has a different biological dad. She knows his name. She knows where he lives. He doesn't have contact with her, but she knows. And when she got old enough, she used to say, why doesn't he come around? And I would say things like, well, maybe he's just busy. Maybe he's just living a different lifestyle than we are. And then when she got older, I was like, listen, he does drugs and he sleeps with a lot of girls. I don't know what he's doing out there, but when you're older, you can call him and ask him.
Yeah.
And she did. And she did get in contact with him, and she didn't like what she got. So, but at least she knew.
Mm-hmm.
She knew, and she had that option of contacting him, which I think is the most important thing in this whole situation, is giving the children the ability to handle it themselves. And I'm sorry, I laugh a lot when I talk about this stuff because it's just so much.
It's okay. I always say if we don't laugh, we'll cry.
So in 2018, I got 23andMe tests for the whole family, because the thing is that my birth certificate father's family, humongous, and they trace all the way back to the 1500s. They have like their own website, their own organization. It's psychotic. And I am a history nerd, and I love that stuff. I've had family trees on paper since I was a teenager. I love family trees. So we're doing 23andMe, and I am going to prove I'm connected to these French people, the Huguenots. I'm going to be connected to them. So we did 23andMe, and my son and husband were very excited that they got to see all their connections because they are directly connected. And my daughter was like, hey, who's Jewish in our family? Because I'm like certain percentage of Ashkenazi Jewish. And I was like, must be your biological dad. It's not me. So she had that little surprise. So that was kind of fun for her. And I had nothing. I mean, like almost literally nothing. I had nobody closer than a third or fourth cousin. I had no names I recognized on either side. And I was like, did they steal me from a street corner? What happened?
Did you at that point wonder if you were adopted, or were you just thinking there's just no matches?
I was sure I wasn't adopted, but I wondered if maybe somebody had a child and was like, somebody else has to take this kid.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I won't even feel bad because my mom just makes me mad anyway. And I'm like, I hated growing up with her. So you know what? If I'm not her kid, I'll be okay with it. And there was just nothing. And I sat on that for a while. And I was like, he can't be my dad because his family's so huge. There's 3 variations of his last name, but everybody's related. And they're all over the US. There's some in France. They're all over the place. So I was like, I know he's not my dad. I'm not sure if she's my mom. So I don't know what's going on here. So I waited. And at the beginning of 2023, I bought an ancestry test because I'm like, I think I'll have a better shot there. They have a bigger database. So I just very quietly did that on my own. And it came back and I still had not much. I did find a half cousin on my maternal side, a half first cousin. And I was like, who is this? Mm-hmm. Turns out that my maternal grandfather had a first family. I knew he had been married first, but I never met any of them because they didn't live there and they weren't around. And apparently they weren't very welcome with his second family. So that was interesting. And I've met her and we're very similar. We're only like 6 months apart in age. We went to schools that were very close to each other. We grew up very close to each other, but we didn't know each other at all. So that was kind of fun. And I would have never met her because my mom was like, there's nobody. These people they left. We don't know what happened to them. Turns out they didn't go far.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. And I was able to give her photos that she had never seen, like of her grandfather. And her dad looks just like his dad. So she thought that was just so fascinating. She was like, oh my gosh, all the men on this side look the same. So it was fun, but there was still nothing paternal. Third and fourth cousins, fifth, farther out. And then one day my mom and my 2 youngest siblings popped up. And I was like, oh, and my mom popped up as my mom. And I have to say, I was a little bit disappointed at that.
Did you really feel disappointed? Or is that a joke?
I was.
Okay.
I was like, dang it.
Okay.
If it had to be one of them, I was hoping it was him instead of her.
Mm.
But I knew it wasn't him. And I was like, I'm really disappointed that it's her. But by then, I had done a lot of studying about ancestry and DNA stuff and how they measure it with the centimorgans. And I knew all the different levels. And I looked at my siblings and I went, those are half siblings. So I was like, now I need to know who's the half. Which half are you? I mean, we all have the same mom. So is he your dad? Because I don't think he's my dad. So I had to contact my mother.
Okay.
And that did not make me happy at all. I just contacted her on Facebook Messenger because I had her blocked on Facebook. So I had to contact her there. And I said, hey, I saw you guys showed up in Ancestry. That's great. It's very exciting. Did Dad do Ancestry by any chance? And she said, oh, yeah. And I said, it's weird because I can't find him. And she said, here, give me your email and I'll send you his test results. And so she just gave me access to his tree and his test results. And I was like, I opened them and I was like, I wonder why she would do that because it's 0%.
At that point, she says nothing. She does not take that opportunity to say, this is the truth. Okay.
Yeah. So I opened it and immediately messaged her and said, you sent me the test results and, I really appreciate that. But you have to know that we have 0 DNA in common. 0. And she said, oh, it slipped my mind.
Oh.
And I was like, slipped your mind that I have a completely different parent. And I know I've heard other people say their mother has said the same thing.
I do think there's some element after a while, the lie becomes the truth for so long that it's not always at the forefront of their mind. And so maybe they just aren't really thinking about it. But when faced with it, to say it slipped my mind is pretty wild.
She said, it slipped my mind. And I said, do you have any idea of who my father is? And she said, of course I know who it is. And I was like, oh, I am seriously surprised at this point. When she said, of course I know who it is, I was like, okay, so who is it? And she gave me a name. She said, his name is Buford, but it doesn't matter because he's dead. And I was like, wow, it doesn't matter because he's dead. Well, it kind of matters to me. So I spent, my poor husband, he is such a good man. I'm going to tell you, because I spent weeks and months, hours and hours and hours, and I'm sure deep into ancestry and records and just a lot of time.
Yeah.
It took me a lot of time to find him because that wasn't his name.
Okay.
His name wasn't Buford. His name was Burfred. And I was looking for someone around her age. That is not what I should have been looking for. I figured it out and I'm like, is this his name? And she said, that's him. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I only knew it was him because she said he died in 2005 in Florida. And then I had to message her again and say, there's quite an age difference going on here. Was this an assault? Was this a forceful situation? I was giving her every option. And she said, no, it was my idea. I wanted to. And I was like, oh, because she was 17 and he was 53.
TaxAct knows small business owners can sometimes use a little help with their taxes. That's why TaxAct has Expert Assist, a team of live tax experts ready to answer any questions you may have. Think of them as your own personal sidekick. Not like one of those funny talking animal sidekicks, more like the super smart nerding out on tax code and business casual attire sidekick, but just as helpful and lovable. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Wow.
And that's a large difference.
Yeah.
And so it made me very concerned for her.
Yeah, that's interesting, that your first instinct was to approach with that compassion for the situation.
Well, I have a lot of feelings about that, especially with what, she had pretty much tried to hand me over to a man in his 30s when I was young. And apparently, that was not a big deal to her. So, yeah, I had to do a lot of research because there's not a lot on his family because they're all gone. Everybody is gone except for third, fourth cousins. He got married when I was 2, and his wife passed away in 1997. He passed away in 2005. When she passed away, he moved and lived with his stepson in Florida, and that's where he passed. But they did bring him back to where I live to be buried with his wife. He actually lived just like 20 minutes from me most of my life. And then he moved a few hours away, but I also moved. So he was still quite close to me. So to think that he was actually really close to me my entire life, it just is very upsetting to me. And I can't even think about it too much.
Did your mom tell you anything more about their relationship, or was it just this happened, it was my idea? She didn't say if it was an affair or what the situation was?
She said he was looking to get married and her dad wanted her. She had quit school when she was 16. And I think even then she was probably a bit much to handle. And her dad wanted her to get married. And this man had never been married and was looking for a wife. And I think that my grandfather, it's in the 60s, he was probably like, look, I'll marry her off. You have a farm, I have a farm. Look, we have more farm now. And you have a wife that will give you children to run the farm. This is a win-win all the way around. But she was not buying that. I mean, she was buying part of it, but not all of it. And so that was it. His wife had 4 children. So he had stepchildren. They were between like 9 and 17 when he got them. So he still had some of them at home for quite some time. And his oldest stepdaughter passed away the same year that his wife did, which was very sad, very unfortunate, because she had 4 young children. And her children's names were in the obituary. And so were her sister's names, but I couldn't find them. And her brother, they have a very common last name. So it's very hard to find any of them. But I found addresses for the step-grandchildren. And I wrote them letters. And I put them in envelopes and I sealed them. And I stuck them in my desk. And then I cried about it a lot.
It's okay. Sorry. Take your time. What's coming up for you right now?
Oh, because you don't know how you're going to be received. Mm-hmm. Or if you're going to be received at all, So I put those letters away and I was like, I'm not going to send them. But I had them stamped. I had them addressed for months. And then finally because I realized who he was. I found all his information in April. In late October, I finally sent them. It took me a long time to get up that courage to do it. And in the meantime, I had joined DNA surprise groups and I was reading a lot. I was listening to podcasts and there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of reactions. And I was scared to do it. So it was late October and I just said, listen, man up and do it. They're either not going to answer, they're going to answer rudely, or they're going to answer nicely. There's only 3 options and no is free. So you just have to do it. I got up one morning, I just picked them up, put them in the mailbox, and I drove away because I was like, if I stay, I will dig them back out of the mailbox. So I had to go. And on, I think it was November 1st, a woman reached out and Facebook friend requested me. And I was like, I think that's one of the stepdaughters. So I accepted, and it was a couple days. And then she messaged me and she said, hey, Wilfred was my stepdad. And I have to say, you look just like him. How are you related? Because in my letter, I didn't say how. I just said I'm closely related.
Okay.
And I had said I'm closely related. I'm looking for like some family health information and photos if you have them. I tried to, keep it pretty light. And she was like, you look just like him. She said, I showed your picture on Facebook to my siblings and they were like, yeah, you look like him. She was finishing high school when her mom married him. And so she was there off and on, and then her younger siblings were there the whole time. They were like 9 and 13. So she said, when we talked about me being his daughter, she said, if he had known, he would have been there for you. She said, that's the kind of guy he was. She said, look, he took us on. There were 4 of us. He took on a single mom with 4 kids. Mm-hmm. And she said, he never treated us like we weren't his kids.
How did it make you feel to hear that?
It made me feel great that the instincts I have for helping people come from someplace. All the things I do, the things that I'm involved in, that makes sense to me. I'm like, yeah, okay, good. That came from a good place. And that's one of the things I said was he a good person?
Yeah.
And she said, absolutely, he was. Yes.
So you find out that he probably did not know about you.
Right.
Does your birth certificate father know that you are not his biological child, or do you find that out?
I asked my mom, and she said, yeah, he knows I was already pregnant when we met, and I told him I didn't want to give the baby up, so he agreed to marry me, and then we got married, and then we fell in love and stayed married. She said, so he absolutely knows you're not his, but he put his name on there anyway.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that was nice of him, but still, y'all should have told me.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you had told me, we wouldn't be in this spot now. And I probably would have had a much different childhood, because I would have had another parent that if something weird was going on, I could call and say, hey, I have this situation going on, and maybe he could have stepped in.
Sure. Yeah.
And he was a farmer. He owned a big farm. The stepkids they said, stop calling them stepkids. They're just my siblings. These people aren't related to me at all. They're the sweetest people, though.
Mm-hmm.
They said, yeah, we could have taught you how to ride the calves and drive a tractor and milk the cows. And I was like, no, I would have actually loved that. That sounds like so much fun.
Yeah. What happens next? Do you get to meet anyone?
Yeah. One of them lives out of country, but she was coming to visit her sister. So the two girls and I met. Their brother lives in Florida still. I talked to him on the phone. I've emailed with him. Sweet guy. So I met up with the two sisters, and we had breakfast, and they brought me a present. They gifted me the family photo album. This thing is so old. It's over 100 years old. And it is full of pictures of him at different stages in life, his siblings, his parents at different stages, some grandparents, great-grandparents, great aunts and uncles, all kinds of people. Because his parents, his mom was the last one to go, and she died in 1965. He hadn't married before that because his mom was bedridden, and he didn't want to put that on a wife to take care of her, so he didn't get married until after she passed away. She passed away in 65 in November. I was born in December of 66. So he was out looking for a wife to handle the house, to, help him with the farm, apparently. I think that was enough for him, and he waited 4 years before he got married. They're very nice. In fact, I just talked to both of them this past week, both of the girls. They were together visiting, so I was going to go and visit, but then things were just crazy, and I was like, I can't make it this time. But I do chat with them at least every couple of weeks. They're very welcoming, very nice. They've sent me scanned pictures that they have, and it's just very, very nice.
Yeah, that's amazing that you've had the opportunity to learn so much about him, even though he's not here anymore. Have you talked any more to your raised family about the situation? No.
I told her that I found him, and that was it. I actually made myself a note here. She said that when I said, okay, I've got all the information, I found out who my father is, we're good to go. You can just leave me. I'm good. She sent me this huge text about how she knows I don't care, but, she's struggling taking care of my birth certificate father, and he can't do anything for himself, and so on and so on. And basically trying to guilt me into doing something. So I copied it, screenshot it, and I sent it to the youngest sibling because she's the closest one to them. And I said, your parents apparently need some help. I don't know what they need. And she said, I was just there this week. They're fine. She was like, Dad's not that bad. He's got a few health issues, but he's fine. She's fine. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just letting you know. And she's the only one I told out of the siblings. I said, this is what's going on. And I told her the whole thing. And she said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Then my mom texted me or messaged me about 3-4 weeks later and said, well, now I've had a heart attack. And I'm pretty sure that was a blaming issue right there. But I'm not the one that was hiding things. So I decided not to take any blame for that. And I was really proud of myself for not taking any blame for it.
I was going to say, that is amazing. Like, you should be proud of yourself for not taking blame for it.
Yeah, it was hard. But I've spent a couple of years in therapy, and now I know I don't have to do that.
Yes.
But otherwise, no, I haven't had any contact. I've taken everybody in that family because they were all basically the same. I took them all off my social media. I just unfriended everybody. I have one cousin that I left on.
Do you still have any questions for anyone involved? Your biological father, your parents?
I have a lot of questions. I'd love to hear his side of it. Like, what the heck? I mean, 53 to 17, I understand what was going on, I think. But it was just a bad idea, a bad decision, a bad everything. I would like to know what was going on from his side and what the aftermath was like for him, because I know what it was like on our side. My parents were, like I said, very young. They both quit school when they were 16. My birth certificate father didn't know how to read. So we were very, very poor. So I think that the flip side, my biological dad was quite well off. I've been out to the cemetery to see where he's buried. I've driven by the house that his father or grandfather, I think it was his grandfather, built that he lived in until the 90s. Beautiful place. I just think that things could have been a lot different, and it would have been really nice. But yeah, there's a whole lot of questions out there. Probably way more than I'm thinking of currently.
Now, you touched on therapy as something that's kind of helped you learn how to navigate your relationship with your family. What has helped you navigate this DNA surprise?
You know, I was really feeling alone, very, very alone. Joining the groups helped because I'm like, every day there's somebody new, and you're able to say, we got it. We got it. We understand how you feel. Your feelings are valid. Here's something that helped me. Or have you looked at it this way? It's really nice to have that camaraderie that we're all in the same boat, and there's so many of us.
What's next for you on your path? Are you trying to learn more about your father, or what are you up to?
I think I have learned a lot of what I can. I do occasionally ask Bob, the stepson, because he lived with him so long at the end. I think he lived with him for 8 years. And he has the best stories. And every time I ask him for a story, he gives me a brand new one. He does not repeat them. And every time he gives me a story, I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. Mostly just am looking for stories. I actually sat down and wrote out some stuff, maybe about 5 pages. It's not a lot. But my best friend keeps saying, you should write, this is a crazy story. And she's like, I think if you told it the way you tell it to me, it would help people. And I'm like, I gloss it up for other people. I don't gloss it up for you.
Yeah.
So she has the down and dirty version. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I think you should share that with people exactly how it is. And, maybe I will. Mm-hmm. But for right now, it's just some thoughts on paper. And, my mother named me after herself. I don't use my first name. I use my middle name. And so for years, I have said I wanted to change my first name because I hate it so much. What happened is that when I turned 18, I suddenly had terrible credit and a lot of creditors that were angry at me. And it was not a good introduction to adulthood. So I have always said I need to change my first name before I die because I don't want to have my tombstone.
And for anybody maybe who's listening who hasn't put the pieces together, your mother took credit out under your name?
Yes, because we had the same first and last name. So she just used my social security number, and that's what she did with me. So when I turned 18, I had terrible credit. I didn't even get to start out decently in adulthood. And the option was, I did go to an attorney and say, what do I do about this? And they said, well, looking at all the paperwork, they said, we can prove with your signatures that this is not you. We can prove that it's your mother. And then they told me, but you have to decide if you want to send her to prison. And I was like, okay, well, never mind then. Because I couldn't do that when she had small children still at home. Even though I know what kind of mother she was to me, I think she was better to them. So I did not do that. And I just dealt with the repercussions.
Wow.
For years.
Yeah.
Years.
You've really, really been through it. Are you thinking about changing your name?
I am. I'm going to knock off my first name and move my middle name up. And then I'm considering taking both grandparents' last names and putting them in the middle. I feel like the more I learn, the more I'm like, oh, yeah, that's definitely who I look like. And that sounds like definitely who I act like. I was at a doctor's office and they said, oh, we see that your dad's side of the family, XYZ. And I said, oh, you have to delete that. He's not my dad. And they were like, oh, really? Do you have any health information? I said, well, I will tell you that everybody on his side of the family, except for his dad, like forever, has lived to be like 90. And they've died of natural causes. They're super healthy people, which is great. But that led to a conversation about how this nurse said, oh, my aunt and uncle have a child. Well, it's not really my uncle's child. It's the guy that my aunt had an affair with. And my uncle knows, but they're not telling her. And I said, how old is she? And she said 15. And I said, you go home and call them. And you tell them they need to tell her right now. They need to sit her down and have that conversation. And it is going to be hard and she's going to be mad. She's going to also cry about it. But better to do it now and bring that guy in because he's going to need to know what's coming at him. But it's way better to let her know now than let her find out when she does a DNA test because that's going to happen.
Exactly.
Everybody does them.
Exactly.
And she was just like, I don't think they're going to do that. And I said, okay, well, good luck.
That leads perfectly to the question. What advice do you have for someone who is keeping a DNA surprise from their child?
No surprises. Nothing about your DNA should be a surprise except for, some crazy thing like you inherited rheumatoid arthritis like I did. That's a bad surprise, but I would take it over some other things. There shouldn't be any surprises. I can't believe that we're in 2024 and people are still just now finding out that their dad's not their dad or their mom's not their mom.
Yeah.
I really feel deeply that honesty with your children can only make things better. That's why I told my daughter right from the beginning when she was little, I'd be like, you have a father that is not here. And, when she was little, we talked about it in easy terms. And as she got older, we increased it. But I wanted to make sure she knew right up front. I never wanted her to be mad at me when she got older. And now I'm really glad that I did it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice do you have for someone who just uncovered a DNA surprise?
Be kind to yourself because, man, it's a lot of emotions. And they're all over the place and they change not just day by day, but like hour. I pushed down a lot of it at first because I was like, I need all the information. I'm just going to research. And I just turned everything off and I just did research. But then when I actually had to deal with it, when I would go to therapy and talk about it, I'd be a total disaster. And so now if I cry, I cry. I mean, that's the way it is. So give yourself grace, give yourself kindness, and get a good therapist and a best friend, and you're going to make it through. It's going to be okay. Join lots of groups.
So well said. Dawn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. You've been through so much, but your attitude and the way that you have just leaned into protecting yourself and learning more about your biological family is really inspiring to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people who are listening. I wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again to Dawn for sharing her story. If you have a DNA surprise that you'd like to share, please submit your story to dnasurprisespodcast.com. Until next time. This episode of DNA Surprises was hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexis Auerselt. It was mixed and mastered by Josh Auerselt of Siren Recording Studios.